And good day to everybody. Hi, I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome back to the S.M.A.R.T Performance Podcast. S standing for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive learning, R for rhythmic operations, T for thriving community, and P for performance. Today, I'm going to welcome Eric Brotman to the show. And as I've told you right up front, is I want to bring different topics to the table. And at the foundation of every good leader, every great leader, we need to have pillars of stability: mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relationship wellness. And today we're going to talk about financial wellness. Why is that important? Well, simply said, if you're stressing about finances at home, you can't be a great leader at work. So before we dive into the topics, again, we're going to have an action-packed 18 to 20 minutes. There will be key takeaways, so stick with us. Eric, why don't you give us a little bit insight of who you are, where you're from, and what we're going to do today.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted to do it, Walter, and thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. I am the CEO of BFG Financial Advisors. That's a mouthful. We're in suburban Maryland, just north of Baltimore. I started the company in 2003 and actually started my practice in 1994. So I've been doing financial advising for over 3 decades, which is terrifying, and it happened fast. But now we've grown the company into an organization from a startup that now has 21 full-time people, clients in 37 states, deep management team, and an excellent bench. And I am getting ready to step down as CEO January 1st, and my succession plan is working. And so I have gained a lot of personal insight into the succession planning process, the financial planning process, and some leadership things that I'm excited to share with your audience.
Excellent. It sounds like you have had a great career path, built up lots of credibility. So let's dive into that first question. So when I work with clients, many of them bring a lot of personal issues to the table, which is good because, again, that foundation is critically important. What are some of the things that you have seen in the people, leaders from across any industry, where financial wellness is not a priority or it's actually a barrier to success? And how do you address that with your clients in order to get them right-minded and set up for success?
It's a great question. And I've got sort of 2 different ways to approach that answer. One is the financial wellness of the leader, him or herself. And the other is the financial wellness of the team and of the employees who work with that leader, because I do think they go together. In terms of the leader, and frankly, for anyone, I consider money to be a little bit like oxygen. And I know that sounds a little strange, but the fact is, when you have enough of it, you do not think about it. And when you don't have enough, it tends to be the only thing you can think about. And so financial unwellness, financial illness, financial illiteracy can actually lead not only to poor job performance, but poor health, and often create some real problems, both medically and emotionally and sometimes physically. So it's really important that this aspect of wellness, and you mentioned it at the top of the show, that this aspect of wellness be addressed. For leaders, I believe it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure our financial house is in order so that that's not a distraction for us. It means being financially literate enough to understand the conversation. It doesn't mean to be a financial expert. Not everyone has that skill, talent, or interest, but to be financially literate enough to have that conversation, to have a written financial plan and an accountability partner, or more than that, and to have a team of legal, tax, and financial folks who can help navigate when things do get bumpy, because let's face it, this is not a linear path that we're on. So the path from financial literacy to financial planning is the path, in my opinion, to financial independence. And I've spent my entire career trying to redefine retirement, because I think retirement's terrible for you. I think it's better to consider retirement the absence of needing to work, not the absence of work itself. And so if you're financially independent and you're still working, it's because you love what you're doing, and it's not necessarily because you're chained to your desk. Now, for your employees, I would say the best thing you can do is make financial literacy and financial wellness resources available to them. And that generally means putting your money where your mouth is and paying for financial wellness type programs. And it also means doing it during work hours, because people have insanely busy lives outside of work. And if they didn't, they'd be able to take care of some of this on their own. So we actually pioneered a financial wellness program for both for-profit and nonprofit companies and organizations around the US, where we can, either with boots on the ground or virtually, do some financial education, integrate the employee benefits and other types of things that the company offers into that financial wellness conversation. And we don't do benefits. So we are not a vendor in that regard. We're purely helping people to understand what is being offered to them so they use it properly. And then doing consults one-on-one where people can have those discussions that are often very intimate about how are we going to deal with mom who's getting older and maybe isn't well, or how are we going to educate the twins, or how should we buy or lease our next car, or should we pay down this mortgage or tackle something else. And people get incredibly personal with us because, number one, we have the right background, but number two, we're not coworkers, we're not employees of the same organization, we're not vendors, and therefore we're about as objective and non-threatening as you can be.
Excellent. So it sounds like that once people come to the realization that they need help, that there is real help out there, and your company certainly does. The plan you lay out sounds really, really good to me, right? Wellness is a three-circle approach, or a 360 approach. I want to go
Yes.
back to the point that people might be listening to this and they identify that, listen, maybe my credit cards are out of control, or I have student loans up the wazoo. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, or
Yeah.
actually, you know what, I'm running a deficit. So it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous. You can only get better after you first admit that you have a problem. So take us to that point. What would you suggest that anybody who's listening now and is in that day-to-day, week-to-week struggle? What can they do to take a hold of themselves and say, listen, I need to be vulnerable and make an admission here?
There's a couple things. First and foremost, you have to be incredibly honest with yourself and with your spouse or partner or significant other or family members. If you're in a situation where there's others in your household who are impacted by this, you have to be honest with yourself. If you lie to yourself, you're wasting everyone's time. The second thing is you have to begin with inventory. You have to know where you really are. And sometimes when we're at the end of that rope from a debt standpoint or from a cash flow standpoint, and it starts to feel a little hopeless, people have a tendency to use the ostrich approach and to put our heads in the sand and hope it gets better. And that generally does not result in good outcomes. So once you've been honest with yourself and your partner, then it's necessary to do some more quantitative analysis. And that generally involves a professional or a team of professionals. And thirdly, in keeping with that, I think it's good to have an accountability partner. It's just like if you're trying to get healthy, it pays to have a nutritionist or a trainer or a yogi or other people who are keeping you on track, not because you don't know how to do it, but because it more likely assures that you will. And so getting a coach or a consultant or a planner or some of these other folks, I think makes it incredibly valuable and incredibly more likely that you'll have some success. So those are the three things I would say to anybody who's sitting in that position: is be honest with yourself and your partner, take inventory so you know where you really are, and get some help, get some accountability and some professional help.
Yeah, excellent. I similar for myself as a mentor, right? That people think, oh, all you do is teach leadership. Well, if you listen to some of the conversations, it's you play psychologist, psychiatrist, financial planner, because these are very, very important pieces. Of course, as a mentor, I also know where my limits are, and I do refer people to the professionals when it gets to the point of actually making a critical decision.
Yeah.
But to guide them, holding yourself accountable is to keep the success, measuring your success on a daily, weekly basis, so you know where you stand, is even more important. And most people fall way, way short on that. So great advice, and it really is that 1, 2, 3 that people need to remember. So let's transition to the next phase of that. So let's say now we have a semi-successful leader, 30 to 45 years old, finally getting to the point that all the bills are under control. You have a couple of months of money in the bank. They're not really looking and struggling. What is it that they should do for themselves at that point in time to set success up for when they are transitioning, not retiring, into the
Not
next
retiring.
phase of their life?
Yeah, no, we call it graduating
There you
to
go.
the next phase of adulthood. You have to have the right people around you. And so I do think there's a lot of conversation in business about efficiencies and AI and machines and IT. But I think ultimately the greatest precursor to success is surrounding yourself with the right human capital, the right people. And that means identifying people whose strengths are different than yours, whose talents are different than yours, often whose perspectives are different than yours, giving them every tool they could possibly need to be great, giving them your time to help mentor them, and then getting out of their way and not micromanaging. as you grow an organization, if you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, if you're growing an organization of any type, it is impossible to continue to micromanage and to retain excellent people. There has to be a path, and ideally, there also has to be an exit strategy. So for most business owners, Walter, our biggest asset isn't our house. Most humans, their biggest asset, they're living in. Well, for ours, our biggest asset most of the time is the one we're working in. And so you need to figure out a way to monetize that. And that means preparing for a capital event, preparing to sell the company either organically and internally or externally, if that's appropriate, depending on the industry. And to me, the best outcome is where you can build a team around you who is willing to acquire equity, willing and able, and who can become your partners and then ultimately become your buyout so that the organization will last longer than you do. Entrepreneurs, this is our legacy. This is our baby. I want to see this company last a lot longer than I do. And so that means having people in the right seats and empowering them and giving them the education, the training, the time, the mentorship, as you mentioned, which I think is incredibly important. I don't know if leaders are born or made. I know it's something you probably talk about. I have a sense that most of them are born, but then their skills are honed. I don't know that you can turn somebody who doesn't have that personality into a great leader. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could give me chapter and verse as to why that's not true. But to me, it seems like natural leaders are the kinds of people who empower others and aren't the ones who manage or sort of drive others in that way.
Yeah, interesting. On the note, there are certainly a fair amount of innate leaders, people who are natural leaders. I think there are far more leaders who need to unlock their magic, and they need to find the confidence first to be able to do it. Once they get that confidence, then their natural leadership capability comes out, and that is amazing. It's like anything else in the world, right? It is that you have a combination of all things. So solid advice. So. I think that, one thing that I always did as a leader in an organization is to make people aware of the benefits that are available, which is one of those things that most people don't really know and understand. So most large organizations, especially the large ones, provide all kinds of discounts on everyday cost items, from telephones to credit cards to travel plans to rental cars, whatever. These are all freebies, right? Two, there's a potential matching of their 401k, 403b. Always optimize and maximize that and figure out how to, get every dollar that is almost for free. And then, three is to make sure that you work with your team to actually follow through.
Yes.
One of the areas that is always interesting, the best investment you can make in yourself is education. And there's an argument to make that too. Tuition reimbursement is offered by most companies. Less than 20% of the people actually use those dollars, and of course these then become unearmarked, petty cash funds for other people to have parties or do whatever. So that's a great waste. So I think it's really, really important to look at the holistic whole picture of what I as a leader need to do for myself and my family, but also what I as a leader need to do for my team, because obviously my team is my most valuable asset. If they're happy, they're more likely to trust me and be engaged, and engagement leads to high performance. And of course, fewer people leave a new organization, which helps with legacy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to, as a last question on this,
Sure.
I think I would remiss not addressing the financial illiteracy of our teenagers, and because the magic of dollar compounding and investing early on is really the difference between somebody struggling in their 40s trying to scramble to put enough money away for their next phase versus somebody who starts putting dollars away by the time they're 15, 16 or 18 years old and consistently invest over a period of time. Make that our parting conversation. And what is your insight on that? What should people do? Where can they find resources? And tell them a little bit what the difference is between starting to invest at 20 versus starting to invest at 45.
I love that. That's about a 6-part question. I'm going to tackle it in a couple of different phases. One will be just the math, and people cringe when they hear math, but there's a formula to figure out how much dollars invested on a monthly or periodic basis will grow over a period of time based on rates of return and so forth. The biggest element to success there is the exponent in any math formula. This is algebra, not calculus, but it's the exponent, and the exponent is time. Time is the thing that takes this from being linear and makes it exponential.
Yeah.
So if you start Let's use the rule of 72 and just make this super simple. And let's assume that with a 7% return, money doubles every 10 years. Let's just use that as the premise. The dollar you put away at 40 by the time you're 70 should have doubled 3 times. The $1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8. If you start at 30 or at 20, you have additional doublings. So it's not just that you have fewer inputs, it's that you have fewer doubles. So instead of going from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, now you're talking 16 and 32. And that's where real wealth happens. And it happens based on consistency. It happens based on time. It happens based on behavior. It has very little to do, almost nothing to do with market timing, and very little to do with what you invest in, so long as it's something that's reasonable and that's responsible. If you do that and you do it over time, you have a much greater chance of success, and success with very big numbers. Inflation is a silent tax people don't think about, but I'm paying for cars what my grandparents and great grandparents paid for houses.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the value of a dollar being eroded over time based on inflation, which means that the numbers you will need to be financially independent and to live not just with dignity, but hopefully with abundance, the numbers are really big. And when you look at them and you're 23 and you look at this number that's so far out, it feels impossible. But how do you eat an elephant, right? One
One
spoon
bite
at a
at a
time.
time.
And so starting early is a giant advantage. And,
Yeah.
and there's, you can get into tax benefits and you can talk about all the other esoteric stuff, but the driver of all of it is behavior. So that's I think the best way to answer that question is that the time value of money will take over.
So, assuming that no teenager or very few of them are listening at this point in time in the show, but their parents are, what is the one thing that the parent can do for their children,
Mhm.
what they should have done for themselves if they have
Mhm.
not, to get them on that path, to get that opportunity to have 6 decades of compounding and set them up for success?
I think there's a couple ways to look at that. One, there are financial literacy courses available. In fact, our company, we put one out that's an online course that's free for anyone who wants to take it. So that's a way to maybe engage your kids in some of those discussions. There's also the ability for parents in some cases to match what their kids are able to save, so that it sort of teaches them, almost like a 401k match might be in 10 years. For every dollar you put away, do that. I mean, we started with our daughter when she was little, and we started with an allowance, and we had the 3 jars, where we had a jar for fun, a jar for long term, and a jar for charity. And we were trying to teach good habits. And, we had a reasonable amount of success with that. I won't say it changed her life, but hopefully she'll remember those lessons. I also think it's really important for parents to not only provide that opportunity, but to have their own house in order, because kids learn most of their financial literacy or illiteracy is learned at home, and it's based on watching their parents. And if you and your spouse are arguing about money, if you're having fights about money, if it's causing conflict in the household, your kids, even if they're not in the room, will know. And so the habits a lot of times we learn as children about everything, but money being no exception, is that if it's a cause of conflict, that it's something you don't talk about. It's something taboo. And so I think the best thing parents can do is have their own house in order, so that they can set a good example, even if it's not a formal lesson, even if it's just, a kid who watches you make good spending decisions or shopping decisions or savings decisions. Once you have your ducks in a row, so to speak, it's much easier to help somebody else with theirs. It's really tough to tell your kids to do one thing while you're doing something completely different.
100%. I mean, it's a simple hierarchy where culture is what we indoctrinated into as birth. From that we
Yes.
get experience, and from those experiences we take actions. Those actions give us the results. If you're not happy with your results, you better go back and get some new experiences and take new actions. So with that said, Eric, thank you very much for a very insightful conversation. There are plenty of key takeaways. Tell us where we can find you, and give me one parting comment to cement things into place.
Our company's website is bfgfa.com. You can learn a lot about us there. You can also go to don'tretiregraduate.com and find our podcast and our books and our workbooks and all the collateral that can help you on this journey. And the one piece of advice I would give everyone is not to wait. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how far ahead or behind you are. It doesn't matter at all as much as getting started immediately and not putting this off for a month or 6 months or 3 years, not waiting for that perfect time, because there is no perfect time. And it's better to start today than it will be tomorrow. And the best time to have invested money, of course, was yesterday or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And since that doesn't exist, don't wait on this. It will not get easier. It will not get better. The outcome will always be better if you start sooner.
Eric, solid advice. It was great having a conversation with you this morning. Again, good luck with your next phase, and that might be a whole podcast on the side. I look forward to reconnecting with you someday in the future. Keep it real, and thank you very much for joining the S.M.A.R.T Performance podcast today.
Thank you.